So, in every story that you read, and I have very fond memories, so to speak, or I don't know if they're fond, meaningful memories. Growing up in the summers, we used to go to these like Jewish communes, these bungalow colonies that were established in the Catskills in the days before air conditioning. And we always have these Tisha B'Av was always beautiful. We'd sit outside and read Eicha and light candles, and because you weren't allowed to learn otherwise, we would go through all the Gemaras and Gittin, even as a kid. So first it was stories, and then it became like reading the text. And it's a shame, I don't see that so much nowadays. But anyway, then there's all kinds. The Gemara tells us all kinds in those episodes in Gittin. They tell us all kinds of stories about the wealthy people being brought to abject poverty and throwing their money in the street because they couldn't buy food, and dying, and of course insinuations of cannibalism, and bringing down to this horrible thing, and the continued blame of the right wingers for this event. They felt that they should have, if they hadn't rebelled against Rome, this wouldn't have happened.
Right.
And that story goes on even more so with the Beitar narratives, where while Rabbi Akiva is, of course, one of the great and most beloved characters in.
He made a big mistake in endorsing Bar Kokhba as a.
Very clear that
Messiah.
He was condemned for doing what he did. But interestingly, there also the stories that are narrated about why that happened. I brought this book just out of comfort, and I don't have it all in my. It's not like in the regular Gemara where it goes in a flow, and I should have brought that. But they keep saying because of this and because of that, these cities were destroyed in the Beitar time, and it's really like that they were very strict about minhag.
Customs.
That they would grow a tree for this purpose and that, which was not really a halachic purpose, and when the Romans cut one down for their own use, that led to a rebellion, and as a result, all this horrible stuff happened. And this is why people confuse them. Here they describe this horrible destruction with rivers of blood flowing, and they give graphic descriptions that the blood was a foot high, and it flowed for a mile, and that it fertilized all the fields in Judea, in Judeo-Capta. By that time it was heavily colonized by Romans, Greeks as they were called. So their blood fertilized their fields for decades.
So what meaning should we derive from this for our lives today? What lessons, if anything, can we deduce from these rivers of blood flowing in the destruction of the Second Temple, the destruction of Bar Kokhba's revolt in 135?
Well, again, so what they did in this left-wing reaction, if you will, was they made a very important move, important theological move, and this is probably what saved Judaism, and created the Judaism we know today, because obviously we don't, other than giving lip service to wanting to see the sacrifices, etc. It's obviously not an important part of our religious life. So the idea of the ability of this transformation from a temple-based ritual to one of prayer and study happens at this point, and that's what they did. The move off of the materiality of the religion into a sort of transformation into the spiritual. This was the critical move.
And also they turned from an outward struggle against the Romans and trying to regain sovereignty of the land of Israel to an inner world of study, of piety, and the performance of prayers and rituals.
And very much a withdrawal from
the world.
political.
So now we get this endless development of of laws and rituals. I think if Judaism had had a country to run the past 2,000 years, we'd have a lot fewer laws in Judaism. But because we've become turned inward and insular and largely withdrawn from the world over the past 2,000 years since the Bar Kokhba revolt, we've developed a religion of increasing focus on more and more minute prescriptions for rituals and for laws that individuals maintain, rather than having a focus on building up an independent land of Israel under Jewish sovereignty. Which is just what you were going to say.
Well, sort of.
So what book do you have there?
So I wanted to turn to some of the. I wanted to turn to contemporary theology in this issue, because for me, I think. So again, you asked the question correctly. What are the reactions? What happens as a result of this? And this really, I think, brings us to a lot of core things, particularly in the modern Jewish theology. To me, it's like I can't. I think these are the days that I suddenly become a 19th century German Jew. There's those conflicts and those dialogues become so important, and we'll get to. But to get to Benjamin, I want to go through the Hasidic thinkers first.
So which book is this?
See. So this is the Sfat Emet.
Ah.
I don't care about the biography so much. For me, it's all about the text.
You can look him up on Wikipedia.
There you go.
So you know it's reliable.
And
it's actually very good. The Wikipedia entry on the Sfat Emet. But go ahead.
Oh, really? So So one of the things that becomes transformed is that we go from a religion that is sort of settled in a practice, right? The temple practice is closed within itself. It is what it is, and it is meant to be done. The Jewish tradition after that becomes one of a yearning for redemption.
Yeah.
This transformation to a religion of messianic hopes, and which is probably, I think, a core definition of the Jewish experience. Ani Maamin, Be'emunah Shalema, B'Viat HaMashiach. History will be redeemed. This idea, the centrality of looking to a transformative becomes the center part of. So all our prayers are that the temple should be rebuilt. Right.
Just there's one quick question I want to acknowledge as a Lakewood Rav who's entered the chat room, and guest 10 says, how many Jews were killed at the time of the destruction of the Second Temple? Supposedly 1 million or so.
Yeah. And
then this person writes, doesn't the Talmud get and address this and use what would appear to be exaggerated numbers?
No, I think we know the 1 million is a correct number because of the census that we have. Again, this is pretty modern time. We tend to think of it as like
1900 years ago.
But this is already a documented period. This is not like it's not like. I mean, it's after Hanukkah, right?
Yeah.
Hanukkah we think of as modern times. So this is already post biblical.
Yeah.
It's not. So we do have a census, and the interesting thing is, and this is where if we ever can talk about it, conversion and such matters. But Professor Louis Feldman in his book points out that while there's probably about 1 million deaths in Judea per se, the overall number of Jews in the world, according to the Roman Empire, rises substantially. And apparently there was such a wave of
conversions to Judaism after the destruction of the Second Temple. The Second Temple. Wow!
It became a favorable thing, and we'll talk. We'll get into that a little bit. It's very interesting, the ramifications, and it sort of fits the historical reality. Sort of fits with what we're going to talk about now in terms of this transformation. That became a positive thing. Like now, this Judaism of yearning for a new future becomes very popular.